Sorry, guys, that is on their end.
Marysville was not the first city in Washington to enact this. They just maybe got most publicity. But Kent had actually done it a few months before. I reached out to their city attorneys, and these aren't, they, you know, this is the numbers that they gave me without really digging into their but Marysville had about, I think, 39 referrals in the first month, and Kent had 17 since September. So a difference there, of course. And otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions, but what it was prepared was based on Marysville ordinance, which is what you guys asked for. So there it is.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think I'll summarize. There was just an interest in council in getting the facts on the table and learning more about this and getting up to speed.
Yeah, and it's obviously going to have an impact on police, prosecution, and courts. And so, Court Administrator Johnson still present. Chief Wolf was at Public Safety and shared some of his thoughts with the council members that were there. And with prosecution, you know, we're kind of in the middle of those two, right? Because it comes from the police to us. And so it's hard, I think, going to be hard to gauge like exactly how many referrals or how many arrests or whatever you would say would be generated if this was passed. The considerations, of course, are that there's going to be legislation at the state level coming out probably soon. The Blake fix that we're currently operating under controlled substance law at the state level expires in July. I believe the last time I checked with AWC, there were 3 bills that have been introduced. But who knows? Maybe you guys will find out next week which ones are the front runners or whatnot. So I'm happy to answer any questions, whatever. Get more information or take direction from you, however you want to go with this.
Perfect. No, thank you so much, Attorney Fennell. Let's go to Jennifer first, since I know you chaired the Public Safety Committee meeting last week.
Yes, although I am now the vice chair, and our wonderful chair is Denise Fry now, but she will be at the next one, but she wasn't able to make it to this one. And so just some things for us to consider. I feel like you probably know my personal opinion about it, but of course, you know, we're a group. So I'm just going to kind of summarize some things from our Public Safety Committee to be discussed on this issue. One, when we talked to Chief Wolf, he asked Ms. Johnson about would we be overwhelming you with this? And I'm going to let her speak for herself on that issue. And so I just would like to hear your comments on the capacity, since we have a brand new behavioral court program. We have 2 people maybe that have been in it so far. If this were to become code, how would that impact the court system?
Well, just with the conversation that we had with the chief last week in regards to the amount of contacts, I mean, 500 contacts, and in talking to him, it didn't sound like those were just contacts of, hey, how are you doing? It was an actual, something was happening at that time. That's a huge impact for the court. And so I guess our request would be, if you are planning on going down this road, please think about us as we are going to need some type of help to be able to bring staff on board, and that takes time. We can work as fast as we can, but those are the things that we have to think about. And if that's going to add additional court time, I can't imagine that it wouldn't. Even if you had an additional 100 cases get added a year, that's court time, that's clerk time. Those are things that I would ask that the council think about if you are planning on moving forward. And so we would definitely be coming back to you and asking for additional resources to cover that. So please.
And I think Chief Wolf brought up, and I'll let him speak for himself next week if he attends, but he brought up just a valid point that he feels like it's almost like putting it on the municipality is almost like an unfunded mandate, but
Yes.
unofficially,
Yes.
so that that the state needs to pay for this. The state needs to provide the funding, and once they have the legislation in place, the hope is that funding would accompany that or opportunities for additional funding to provide those support services. I'll let him speak for himself next week if he comes. So what I appreciated too about that meeting is that Ms. Fennell wanted to do additional outreach. And one of the organizations that you talked about was Cashapp County Drug Court alumni. And I do have a person that we can connect with for that to get feedback from that group. I think that that's a very relevant group thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. That's a very relevant group that we should be getting feedback from because they're people who have participated in the diversion program, people directly impacted by drug laws, right? And then also, I don't know the mechanism that we would use other than public comment to get feedback from business owners and residents. Do we have an idea for that, or would we just use the public comment as a mechanism in our meeting?
However you guys want to do it, it's up to you. So the suggestion that I had was, though, since it is a criminal law, and I think we should really do this on all of them, is that when we're passing new code, that we share it with the local bar association so that they can have comments on it. That might even head off in some circumstances if someone thinks that it is preempted or unconstitutional or something like that. I don't see that issue, but some people might, lawyers will sometimes just type away and get all kinds of stuff. And then also in this one, like you said, I thought that the Drug Court Alumni Association would be good, but I didn't want to do that yet because we don't accept comments here anyway. And I also wasn't even sure if it would leave this meeting. I don't know what you guys are doing. So I think you send, what I would probably do is send a link to our packet, and if it gets included for a council packet like this ordinance, it'll have the same agenda bill, it'll have the ordinance, and then instead of going just through our local distributions, I would probably just work with Lori to send it to maybe like add some emails to that list for this item.
And another consideration too, as we decide if we want to move this forward, is the idea that, and I want you to talk to Chief Wolf once again about this, but the idea of training and then retraining a new policy. So if the state is going to have a Blake fix by the end of session, then, and we have a code in place that the police are currently being trained on, they'll have to be retrained again. And we know how labor intensive that can be sometimes, how information flowing through and then you're changing the information, how that can create a source of frustration. That's all that I want to comment on that. I'm going to go ahead and defer to my colleagues for the rest of the time.
I think all of these comments by Vice President Cumberland are well taken, and we should be determining what we need to be doing as a community. We obviously have a very big drug problem. We have a poverty problem. We have a housing problem. We have a mental health crisis in this country, and they're all very much linked. And Administrator Johnson, I think you're absolutely correct that we shouldn't be sending an unfunded mandate to the court's way. We should be thinking about it holistically. My main question is, one, I know that code ultimately gets interpreted by the courts who have the final say on the interpretive aspect of it, but there's also discretion. There's police officer discretion, there's prosecutorial discretion. So Attorney Fennell, can you tell me on subsection B, when it's defining terms and it says use means any effort taken into furtherance of an attempt to inject, ingest, inhale, and otherwise introduce a controlled substance into the human body. The way I read this, and I would assume a court would interpret this, and I would assume police officers and prosecutors would interpret this, is that it's actually the act of introducing the substance into the body. differentiated from being in public under the influence of the controlled.
Here, if that isn't clear to everyone.
Can you repeat that
Yeah.
for the microphone?
It is absolutely the act. It's not, this is not possession. Possession would be preempted. And,
Or under the influence, right? If they no longer possess, it's actually in their body.
right, no, this is with the situation I think that Chief Wolf discussed, he shared something that happened when he was on bike patrol, and that was coming upon someone who had a needle in their arm, and like had a conversation, like while they were injecting themselves with a controlled substance, and that, you know, that is alarming to people and to see that in public, and they often call the police, and they currently really don't. That's actually, there's nothing that really prohibits that. It is something under our state law. You can, if they have, you know, you could give them a pamphlet or that, you know, that contact under possession. Because obviously, if you're using, you're also possessing. But if you're possessing, you're not necessarily using. Okay.
Thank you. And then my next question is, you know, as we wait for the state legislature to respond to the court's decisions, you know, I think it's important that cities take their own actions to figure it out. I think I said this in study session, just like states are laboratories of democracy for the federal government, I think cities can be laboratories of democracy for the state government to figure out what works to fix public policy problems. Would we just be able, if we did move as a body and felt that we needed to, you know, move forward with this to address some of the issues that we've been seeing in our community, it would be fine for us to change the effective date from 10 days to 6 months from now, right? If we needed to delay to figure out, you know, how we would be funding it, how we would be, how the state legislature would be taking off, we can delay its
Yes,
implementation.
you can write into the ordinance a later effective date.
Thank you so much. That's all.
Well, I can no longer hear you, but can you hear me? Okay, all right. I was initially pretty supportive of this, as you may remember at study session, but I didn't understand how it had been brought up. I had assumed mistakenly that it had come through Chief Wolf or you know, the city attorney. And for all the reasons that have been discussed since then and tonight, yeah, I'd really hate to see this go any further right now with the state really working on this. If we wanted to, I know there was interest in advocating for legislation earlier. Could we, would it be possible for us to analyze the legislation that's in there now and see if we can support it?
All right, let's see, there we go. I think we had one mic battery die, so apologies, Denise. So I might suggest maybe we can, as a council, flesh out the facts of what we have before us and kind of ask questions on that, and then I can lead a discussion at the end of how we want to move this forward with a couple options we have. I'm sorry, whether or not to move it forward, and if we do, in what manner, I should say. Okay.
I just wanted to clarify with everybody, because I'm not there with you, that you know, whatever support I had shown earlier, I was not feeling so supportive anymore.
Appreciate that. Eric.
Several points I'd like to bring up. One is I may have been the instigator of this. I don't know if anyone else had this on their agenda for the council retreat, but I did. And I was struck by the news report, I think it was on Como, Marysville, in particular, a police officer who expressed how grateful he was to have this tool in Marysville because the current system is broken. You can go up to someone that is injecting morphine, or unbeknownst to them, they're injecting morphine laced with fentanyl and killing themselves, and he's standing there helpless because he can't do anything other than saying, hey, by the way, there's a program for you if you want it. And this actually gave him a tool to be able to cite him and say, now you got to, and as Chief Wolf said, and I don't know what the exact statistic was, but the Navigator program had something like 550 referrals and one person took them up on it. These people are dying, and your inaction, our inaction has a side effect of killing people when we should be trying to push them into the system, and I don't care what it costs. We should be helping these people out. And until we got handcuffed by this judicial decision, I do not have confidence that our legislature is going to pick from various things. They may do nothing, and then we still have people dying. So I really think we need to send a message to the legislature that this is what works, this is what we're doing, and we need a state law to make this uniform across the state. This is frustrating to me. The way I read this, drinking alcohol in a park is against the law. Smoking marijuana, even though that's a legal drug under the state law, smoking marijuana in a park is against the law. So the officer has the discretion. And this is merely gives you discretion, doesn't mean it's automatic. Officer, you know what, if the court is overburdened with cases, the police force can say, okay, hey, you got to hold back on writing these tickets because they're overloaded with cases. So right now you can write a ticket for open container drinking, I should say, not just, and smoking marijuana, but shooting whatever, doing crack cocaine, whatever is okay. Really? No, I can't, no. The answer is no, it's not okay.
Michael?
So I wasn't privy to the opening of this topic, but it was illegal, right? Like pre-Blake decision. Okay, so the part of it is the referral, right? But it was illegal before, so it's to me almost seems like a housekeeping thing. We had something that was illegal that we thought should have been illegal, was no longer. Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out one issue. So prior to Blake, use always encompassed possession, right? That's what I was just saying. Those were felonies that were prosecuted in Port Orchard and Superior Court. And when the Blake decision happened, they weren't being prosecuted anywhere because it was, unconstitutional. So the what Administrator Johnson and what Chief Wolf were saying is that, so, we can't make something a felony. We can only make things misdemeanors at the municipal code level. And so it puts that burden for prosecution and incarceration and supervision and defense services, right? And court services from a state level, felony level, to a misdemeanor level that's handled in the municipal court. So that's that shift. And so while it was illegal 2 years ago, it wasn't prosecuted in our municipal court 2 years ago.
Okay, that's great, because that's kind of what the concern was. But it could be, even if this is just a stopgap to allow law enforcement to have that tool until maybe the state does a correction, because it could be a while, as we learned their big focuses, budget and stuff. I don't know, the struggle or the con for me is like, are we just making it tougher to even be unhoused or more illegal to be unhoused. I think too, but I guess technically it's illegal to do this stuff in private too. Well, possession, I guess, it's an odd thing, but but you know, there's concerns of you know, I know businesses, especially in our downtown, with you know finding folks, and then folks don't feel safe, family, you know, so it's definitely a trade-off on what we do, but I wouldn't want to come upon it, and I wouldn't know what to do, and then to find out if I called somebody, no one's gonna offer aid or assistance or you know prevent it. So, anyways, I again kind of new to this conversation, but in general, I feel like it seems like something we should pursue.
I'll take my turn, then we'll do a second round with folks.
Anna hasn't done
Yep. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, Anna. Sorry, I have a little counter while trying to keep track. I didn't look. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is, the use in public was illegal in 2019, that's correct? Okay, so,
So sorry, Attorney Finelli, microphone again. Thank you.
yes. So Eric, Michael, you will possibly remember this study session in 2019 where a young bicycle officer stood up and was talking about his experience in working with people on the street in downtown. Pardon me. He had a brother who had gone down that hole and had been lost. He was still alive. And it was his mission to like go among people and say, I have a chance to bring you to drug court and you have a chance to turn your life around. And some of them, you know, like a miracle would happen and just be one rehab and they were fine. But for most people, it was just like quitting anything. They keep, you know, going back and he'd keep going. You can do it. You can get back on. And he was really thrilled about how many people he had been able to recall to life. This is a little personal for me, obviously. And I think about there's like a house in my district that's surrounded by cars where people are using in their cars. And there's nothing that can be done about it. They could just, well, expire in their cars because we don't know what's coming down the pike as far as the drugs that are happening. I don't think this should be a 6 months out. I think that it's not that difficult a training. I heard the other points, but it's not that difficult a training to say, if they're using, you can arrest them, you know, or offer them a referral. That's not a complex training. And it's something that most officers working for the Bremerton Police Department are accustomed to, you know, they did it in the past. I'm not really thinking so much about how it'll make downtown prettier or anything like that. I'm thinking it would be really nice if people did not die needlessly. There just is enough of that happening. I truly understand your concerns, Administrator Jennifer. Yeah. But we have to step up here, in my opinion. That's it.
Thank you, Anna. So my thoughts are, I think this is where everyone's at, but I'll just speak for me personally, that I see this, I do not want to pass something that's just penalizing people to penalize them, right? What I thought I heard in the retreat from the chief at the time, and I haven't watched obviously don't attend the public safety briefings, another case we'll have to hear from him directly, but what I heard at the retreat was that this was a tool to basically have people get help. And so I view it through that lens that if this is a tool that helps people, it doesn't just penalize them, but it actually gets them into rehab and gets them treatment and gets, lives back on track. That's the reason I would consider it. And I think I heard back then as well that if somebody was arrested on this misdemeanor, Attorney Fennell, correct me on the process, but that person would be referred to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor could first decide whether or not to basically press charges or proceed with prosecution.
Right, there would be we would make a decision on what, every person who's charged is reviewed by our office on whether they go forward or not.
So the prosecutor would have discretion, and assuming, as I think everyone on the current employment is, if the courts were tied up, if there was no drug programs or diversion possible, they could decide not to prosecute. It'd be in their discretion in that case.
Sure, and so keep in mind though that, and this is just a big picture thing, people have to want to engage in therapeutic court. They have to want to engage in treatment and serve. It's one of the differences between this being in a municipal court versus being in superior court is that in superior court, we're looking at, in the past, whenever, before the Blake decision, people could often, depending on their criminal history, be looking at significant sentences that were motivating to do something to avoid being away from your kids that long, or just, being in prison that long. And so, gross misdemeanor goes up to a year in jail. And this is, I think, contemplated to be a misdemeanor, which means it would cap out at 90 days. It is quite possible that people will not be motivated. And this even really goes for the therapeutic court program. People have to choose to participate, and that because of the lower sentences at the municipal court level, some people just aren't motivated. They would rather be guilty and have a sentence imposed on them and continue about their life and not have to meet with the judge and a prosecutor every day of the week. So I just wanted to let you know,
I
this
appreciate
is
the
not,
process.
you make this illegal. It's not going to be that someone's looking at the 0 to, the sentence ranges that people were looking at that motivated some of those success stories that you were talking about that made people want to go to drug program.
So, gotcha. So if someone gets charged, prosecutor can decide whether or not to prosecute. If they do, then it goes to the court, then it goes before the judge, and the judge, I'll ask Administrator Johnson, the judge can then decide basically the sentencing.
People have a lot of rights when they get charged with a crime, and the judge and the prosecutor don't get to decide those for them. And so they could choose to plead guilty. Let's say if they got arrested on a Friday and they're looking at a sentence recommendation of 15 days in jail, something like that, right? They could say, fine, I'm going to sit this out. I'm going to get a third off. I'm going to do 10 days. I'm going to be out, and I'm not going to have to go to Bremerton Municipal Court every Tuesday at 10. So those just, they can plead guilty. They could say, no, I think this is a stupid law, or I think maybe it's going to get preempted or something. I'm going to set this for trial. I'm going to kind of try to kick it down the road a little bit and see what happens. They could say, so that we're going to appoint them attorneys. It's not going to be that they show up to court and where the judge says you have to go to treatment, the Monday afterwards. They're going to have options that they can exercise, and it might not be the ones that you think that they should.
Well, no, thank you for explaining that. Okay, and then let's say they plead guilty, judge's discretion on sentencing and treatment. And so if there are no treatment, let's say there's no treatment available, the resources aren't there, the judge could then, if they had pled guilty and there was a sentencing, basically say, I'm going to give you the minimum sentence because there are no diversion programs available.
Correct. And I
Okay.
mean, the other thing is too, is, I mean, like Kylie, Ms. Reynolds just said, you know, if it's just it's a 90 day, it's a misdemeanor. So, you know, they get booked in on a Friday night. Okay, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday night, Monday, they get heard. That's already 4 days. And if they're getting an offer of 15 days, you know, plus credit, they're out in a few days. It's just things you need to think about. And the fact that, yes, the city attorney's office can have a discretion on whether they're going to file or not, but those people are still getting booked into the jail. So we still need to process them that Monday morning or every day that they're booked. If it's a decline, okay, we're going to release. It's still paperwork, still processes that the court has to do on our end.
Thank you, and I really appreciate just getting mutual understanding and the facts out there. Last question before we go around to, so currently, do you have the rate on if like public intoxication, if somebody's drinking beer down the street and they get cited, this process is in place for them currently or no?
That's an infraction.
Okay,
So this is a crime. They're processed differently. When you get cited with an infraction, you get handed a piece of paper. Everyone's gotten a ticket. That's the same process for marijuana and.
so this would escalate our current rule on alcohol and marijuana as
Right.
well? Or
Well, no, it is higher. So they're both all illegal. I mean, or right now, marijuana, those are citable offenses. They are not arrestable crimes. This is an arrestable offense. It would be a misdemeanor.
I'm
Similar to like.
sorry. There's
Similar to like.
Restate that again on, is this bringing substances besides alcohol and marijuana to the same level that we currently have alcohol and marijuana?
No, it's
Okay.
one above.
Okay.
So if you think of like an infraction as like the lowest level, then misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, felony, and you can do A, B, and C felony. But well, not you can't, the legislature. But what I mean is, like right now, alcohol and marijuana use in public is an infraction. This is a misdemeanor, and so on infractions, you don't get booked into the jail. You get issued a piece of paper, and you come to the court, and you can pay it or contest it, or. But for an arrestable offense, they could actually be put under arrest and taken to the jail and booked in, and then they would be seen by the judge the following judicial day or within 2 days.
Thank you for clearing that up. It's very helpful. All right, let's go around to, and I've seen Quinn's, oh, I'm sorry, well, but Denise did speak on this already. So, but her hand is up. It's been up for a while, it sounds like. All right, so Denise, then Quinn.
Just trying to understand the rules. So Kylie, Attorney Fennell, the current pieces of legislation that are being considered at the state level, are those, would those be considered felonies then?
I have not reviewed all of the bills that have been introduced. The current piece of legislation, possession is not a felony. It's a misdemeanor, which is another one of those things where it went from being something that was handled in Superior Court to being something that's handled in municipal or district court. And so if the legislature, I mean, it's certainly within their capability to do that. I don't know. I don't think any of the current bills are doing that. At least probably. I mean,
we're not talking really about possession, are we? Aren't we mostly focusing on the act of use?
This particular ordinance is focusing on use. The legislature is focusing on possession, which includes use, because that's what the Blake decision dealt with, was the possession of controlled substance. And so that's what they're looking at. It's likely to encompass, or it might not encompass, I guess I should say that. It could be that they just don't address use, right? And then if we had something on the books that made use criminal, then it wouldn't end up being preempted and we could continue on with having it. If they specifically address use, then we might have to come back to this and repeal it. And you saw, I mean, last year we did a whole round of repealing things and modifying things, and you've seen that process work. So, I don't know what they're currently looking at though. I haven't reviewed all the bills.
And then just lastly, I really think Chief Wolf needs to be a part of this conversation, and I value his insight and knowledge of impact and its value as a tool, and I'd really appreciate his participation in the conversation.
Quinn.
Yeah, every time somebody speaks, I get swayed in one direction or the other, to be honest. You know, Councilmember Fry's comments really resonate with me because at the joint planning session, I also kind of felt like it was percolating up from police, and police was asking for this. During public safety, my read was we may not have the manpower to do this if you pass it. So I'm meeting with Chief Wolf on Friday. I'm having lunch with him, and I'm happy to report back in an informational way of clarifying that. And I'll make sure whatever communication I send out to council is approved by him, so I'm understanding that position correctly. Because Councilmember Fry, I think you're correct, and we really needing to understand that. In addition, I think Councilmember Chamberlain's points are really well taken, and what I keep going back to are like policy papers that I wrote about collateral consequences, right? Like it's not just this is a touchstone for getting folks help that need help and ensuring that they don't pass, which is really the point of this, right? But we do need to be really thoughtful about collateral consequences. Is this going to affect, ability to get affordable housing, SNAP benefits, things like that? I know that generally it was mostly felonies that the federal government looked at, but I might like maybe a quick, email memo from legal, letting us know, not just what are the effects of being incarcerated, but having that on their record moving forward so that we can really think about, the balance of all the interests here. But for me personally, once I get those questions answered and a little bit more input from other stakeholders, which I think have been suggested, Councilmember Mockler's statements really, I feel like, swayed me the most in that, I've dealt with people in my life with addiction, people that were very close to death. And I, think about how many times I've seen interaction with the law actually turn into kind of a wake up moment. And I also think about, and I think I mentioned this at the retreat, the 20 under 40, where I always forget her name, but Sarah Borden said that the first time in her life that she was sober was the time that she was arrested. And, 15 days of sobriety, 90 days of sobriety might just be enough for somebody to kind of seek the help that they need. So I'm conflicted. I think it's a lot of nuanced points, but I will report back to council after talking with Chief Wolf on Friday.
I saw Anna's hand up before, so Anna, please go ahead.
So you were making very good points about 15 days or even just 3 months, as opposed to the much longer sentences for felony. But carrying forward from Quinn's words, it's and quoting the young bicycle cop again, bicycle officer again, it's, do you want to go cold turkey, or do you want to go through a process that will be much less painful? And that swayed many people. I hadn't heard Sarah Borden's words, but that is also quite powerful.
Appreciate it. Eric, your hand. Michael and, sorry, Eric.
First recommendation is we have another study session. We don't put this on the agenda this week. There's too many unanswered questions. I would like to hear from Chief Wolf and see if we have his support for this, because it has to go from leadership on down to the police force. My thought was enacting this law gave the police force support in doing their job instead of the frustration which I understood they were experiencing through the Marysville experience. If Bremerton's unique and they're not experiencing this frustration, okay, I think it's universal, but I want to give him the opportunity, if he's against this, to explain why, so as police officers understand why we're not passing an ordinance similar to Marysville or Kent. So we're not inventing the wheel. If we pass this, we are taking something that 2 municipalities, to the best of our knowledge, already have in place. So some type of testimony or input from those municipalities on their success of their program so far would be beneficial for us in a study session. The other thing is, thankfully, I'm not addicted to drugs, and I've never been addicted to drugs. But I gotta believe if you are in an environment where you can't take drugs for 15 days or up to 90 days, it's going to be one hell of an experience. But also, maybe then your mind will be clear enough to say, you know what, I need help, versus you're on the street and you're on, on whatever your drug of choice is, and you say, I don't want help. Just want to give these people a chance. Again, I'm willing. I'd like to hear from all aspects, and if we can get the message out for when this does go on the agenda, hopefully, we can get testimony from all viewpoints and make our decision from there, an informed decision. And I'm hopeful that from this point forward, council doesn't say, I'm against this, I'm for this. We just all listen and throw our viewpoints out, and we'll wait until we hear all the testimony and make our decision.
All right, Jennifer, then Michael.
Okay, so the public safety hat is off from the committee. I'm just going to speak freely because I just really want you in the next couple weeks. I agree with Councilmember Younger that we should put it off to another study session. I want you to evaluate your biases and think about it, because if you're under some delusion that you think that this is going to save everybody, it's not. I've witnessed, we had a roommate back in 2002 who we saved his life from an overdose, a heroin overdose. I woke up early, I heard a noise, I went down there, and he was dying. And he faced some legal ramifications. But he continued to use. He ended up at a party, falling off a balcony and getting brain damage, okay? And I just need to issue a trigger warning that I'm gonna just mention suicide. I'm gonna mention some other maybe triggering things for just a moment, but I'll try to be brief. My uncle was indigent. He lived in the woods sometimes, and sometimes he was on ranches that offered treatment services and so on. And he had periods of time where he was afforded sobriety, where he was afforded that time. He eventually, even with all the benefits that he had, relapsed and took his life. Time after time, people can have those moments of clarity, that time in sobriety, that time being clean, and they will go out and they will die. But sometimes people will be ready to accept the help. But it does not always come, it rarely comes with legal intervention. People will continue to go out until they are ready to get help. And so I just want you to just look at statistics. I want you to be very mindful about if you are under this premise that criminalizing drug use will help people, or if it really is that you want to criminalize this behavior because it is antisocial and you want to eliminate this behavior from your community for the sake of another group. And you know where I come from. You know, I come from a place of recovery myself, which I'm technically not supposed to be public about, but it's not a secret. And I just want you to don't come without the facts of what legal intervention does to people. We criminalize more people in this country than any other developed country. Why are we giving another tool? Let's make it the same as let's have other options. Let's hear from other people involved. And let's be real with your intention to enact a new law. Is it to eliminate the behavior or is it to try to get people help? That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Michael.
Actually, Jennifer pretty much just summed up what I was going to say is, and I'll just kind of, in my own words, say the last part too is, like, what's the goal here, or what's the problem here that we're trying to fix? Because I kind of started this with one idea, and I've kind of lost it along the way. You know, so there are problems connected to the sort of public use, but are we, you know, is it an intervention point? Is it to clean the streets so that shoppers feel safer? You know, like, so I think we have to be clear on what we're trying to do here. So I appreciate what Jennifer said.
Well, thank you. So I see, yes, Mayor.
This might help, and it's not, Chief needs to be here to speak to answer
Yes.
specific questions, but I am working with Cashapp County, and they do have a program where the first interaction in certain circumstances, unless there's a crime actually being committed, is going to be, it comes from a case management perspective with a resource guide and options and some skills with communicating with folks, you know, who might be homeless or, you know, there's a lot of association with drug use, untreated mental illness, and homelessness. So there's a couple between the county and a nonprofit. I'll share it with you when I get some results. And so this will be.
Yeah, let me say a lot. Just any specifics. It's not.
Yeah,
At the end of the evening, you can definitely email us anything.
most of this doesn't work in isolation. You actually have to. I mean, I'm not going to give you advice on this.
Right, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can consider that there'll be some other programs out there to help folks who are addicted. They don't always accept, as Councilor Chamberlain said the first time, but if there's multiple times where maybe one of them sticks, and that's going to be coming. I don't know if that helps with your decision or not. I'll let you decide.
No, appreciate it. I think I see a couple paths that we should choose from here. Let me just lay them out, and I think I see kind of a consensus, but just to put them all out there, we can put it on general business next week with an action attached, and I'm seeing a bunch of head nods and no's. I expect. Perfect. Keep giving those head nods or not. We could put it on general business for input only, as we've done in the past, to get public input. We could just postpone this to another study session to hear from the chief and from other folks and keep gathering more data. And if we did that, that study session could either be, 2 weeks from now, or it could be after the legislative session to see how things shake out. And the final option I see, and this can go hand in hand with having a later study session, is we could, as a council, decide to send a letter, or any council members can on their own, to the legislature urging them to take, some sort of action as a parallel path. So head nods on another study session in the future at some point. Is that okay? Seeing head nods there. So we'll do that, and then thumbs up on 2 weeks from now to continue the discussion versus wait till after the legislature. Okay, I'm seeing we should keep talking about this. All right. So why don't we postpone this not postpone, but we'll put it on study session for 2 weeks from now. See if we can get the chief here, and we can all go and do some more research and see if there's anybody else who wants at the table to get the right data and input. And yeah, Attorney Fennell, please weigh in.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what my assignment is. I think Quinn wanted me to look into potential collateral consequences that might result because this is a drug conviction. And it sounds like there's an invitation being extended to the police chief to provide the position of the police department on this proposal and attend at the next study session.
Yes.
Can we get some, like, questions you might ask so we can, the chief and I can work together to, press police position on this? And that's.
So I think the council's questions, let's just get right here, was basically, do you have the staff currently to enforce this if enacted, or would you in the future? Is this a tool that you would use if enacted in order to basically help people get treatment? And council, help me out for any other specific questions, but basically, do you view this as a net benefit to the city, or do you not from the position of law enforcement? Do you have another question there? Yeah.
How do you plan to fund it?
Okay. I think we got a path forward. All right. Oh, no, sorry. No, go ahead.
There was another question, and that is the experience of the 2 municipalities that have already had this in place. What has there been? And I don't mind if our attorney just reaches out to their.
I already have, so I can share that. I thought I said that at the outset. I'm sorry.
With their actual, the statistics and all that?
The 39 referrals for Marysville since it was enacted in December. I talked to the city attorney overall. They seem fairly pleased. There have been 17, I think, referrals in Kent since September. So they've had longer but fewer. Of the 17, I think the prosecution was moving forward with 12.
Okay.
So
we
you
can
could
get
have
that in.
something in written form.
Yeah.
So we can understand how many went for prosecution, how many went for referral.
Well, the referral is from the police to prosecution.
Okay, no, so I'm talking about then referrals that, okay, they go to the drug court, to the drug versus they go to jail.
I can try to get that information. It might be too soon because the life of a case, like for an out of custody person, they've got 90-day clock at the outset, and it's often extended. And so, like for the people in Marysville, if they appeared, they might not have even had a court appearance yet. And so we're probably not going to get stats from that because theirs I think went into effect in December. So I can try.
So I think, yeah, whatever information you're able to get to put in the study session packet for 2 weeks from now would be fantastic.
Maybe you and you can ask some more questions about what type of formal endorsement did they need from their police chief?
Sure, and I think I was looking on Marysville website. When I spoke to Steve and the city attorney, he mentioned it. I think it was included in their mayor's state of the city address. And I looked online. It's actually not written. It's a video. I haven't watched it. It's in here, but there might be more information if anyone wants to check that out. I'll be checking it out. But if you look up like Marysville Mayor, State of the City, it's a YouTube link on their website, and I think it's addressed in there.
Okay.
It's completely up to the mayor and the police chief, but I wouldn't mind hearing from a street patrolman that's has feet on the ground. As to what he's seen out there.
No, I think that's a fair point. Obviously up to the mayor to direct the chief and the chief to direct his employees, but I would personally love to hear as well, to hear firsthand experience, cases where something like this may help, cases where it may not. See how prevalent those cases are. Okay, so with that, I think we got clear path forward. We'll have this on study session 2 weeks from now. We'll extend an invite to the police chief and ask if he would be okay allowing a street patrolman to be here as well. I just thank everybody for this is a difficult topic and conversation, and I really appreciate everybody for not getting the facts out there. So with that, propose we do general council business up until the resuming the retreat item, and look at taking a break when we finish that. So with that, we'll move on to general council business, and I'd like to invite Public Safety Committee Vice Chair Jennifer Chamberlain to provide a summary of highlights from the last meeting held on February 2nd.